Hello, welcome to episode 175 of the Craft House Magic podcast. My name's Ellie and I'm coming to you from Norwich in Norfolk in the UK, and today is the 29th of July, so welcome everybody. I hope you've all had a lovely crafty week since the last time I've spoken to you, and I'm here to share all the things that I've been making in the last 7 days. So today I have some knitting, some sewing, a gadget, a couple of questions from the Ask Me Anything thread on Ravelry, and some information on my shop update. And on the 1st of August I'll be releasing my advents for pre-order, so I'll be talking a little bit more about that. We have a couple of Makalongs going on in the Ravelry group and on Instagram, and I'll leave details of those in the description bar down below, as well as my social media links and website, etc. So let's get on to the knitting, shall we? So I finished the baby booties that I started last week. They are very, very cute. So I'm really pleased with how these come out. So they are the Stay On Booties by Knitgirls Mother, and I'll leave a link to the pattern in the description bar down below. The yarn is from Layfamily yarns, and it's one of her Great British Bake Off colourways from a couple of years ago, maybe even more. And I just thought that these would be ideal for little baby booties because they're nice and multicoloured, because I always like lots of colours for a baby. And if I put my finger in it, you can see sort of how big they are. They come out something like that. They are a long booty that can be folded down. It's knitted flat. I used some higher DPN needles to knit these, but there's a point. So basically you're knitting a rectangle and then you're doing an extension of the rectangle in the middle, and then you have to pick up stitches around the sides. And when I was using my 2 DPNs to knit backwards and forwards with, I found it easier to get a couple more DPNs to pick up stitches up the sides of that bit, and that little rectangle forms the top of the foot. It is a free pattern. The other thing that I noted is that on the website the pattern's written out because it's translated from another language initially. There are some notes underneath the pattern that explain a couple of errors. Don't forget to have a look at those when you are knitting the pattern, because there is a couple of stitch counts that are out or lost in translation. But as soon as you take those into account, they work really well. And I have knitted about 5 pairs of these before for various friends over the years, and they've said, oh, can I have another pair? They don't fall off, so they do stay on. I knitted these on 2.25 DPN needles. It does say that you can use 2.25, 2.5 or 2.75, and I thought, well, because I want them to fit from birth, I'll knit a really small pair first, and I can perhaps use a 2.5 and a 2.75 for sort of larger sizes. The pattern does have 2 sizes written in there as well, so you can sort of choose which gauge you want to go for and what size as well. So for these booties I used about 25 grams of yarn, and the pattern does say that you might need up to 40 grams, but because I used 2.25mm needles, I think because I'm tight knitter as well, I only used 25. So those of you who have perhaps missed the last couple of podcasts, I've explained that I am actually 5 months pregnant, and we are due to have a baby at the end of November, and since last week we've had another scan and it's supposed to be a boy, so I'm excited to make all these cute little boy outfits. So that is my first finished object, and I have a second finished object. This is a cheap one because Adam's mum Liz knitted this for me. So this is knitted in some really soft drops baby alpaca and silk yarn that I had in my stash, and I chose a really beautiful lacy shawl pattern which is called the Rosewater shawl by Janina Kallio, and I just love it. So I asked Liz, because I had quite a lot of this yarn left over, to actually do 2 repeats of the lace at the bottom. So it is a little bit bigger than the pattern is written, but I think that looks really nice. So there is exactly 2 times the amount of lace that there was in the initial pattern. So there's like garter stitch up to here, and then there's lace following on from that. So I suppose the shawl would be sort of that much shorter for both ends if you haven't knit in the lace pattern twice. but isn't that pretty? I just love that quite open lace really. So I give it a block. I actually only blocked it yesterday because it's quite warm. I can get things to dry quite quickly. And I think that's come out really lovely, and it looks pretty double-sided, to be honest. I think it's nice to have a shawl that you can use double-sided, because you don't have to worry about putting it on the wrong way. That's probably the right side, I think. So let's have a look at it on. So I'd probably wear this one because it's quite a lacy shawl, like this, with a little shawl pin just there, so you can see it across my back. And I think that comes down to a nice length with that extra bit of lace knitted as well. Really pretty. Really pleased with how this has come out. I probably, see, I sometimes wear shawls like a scarf. I probably wouldn't wear this one like this, although I don't know, it still looks pretty. So there we go, another new shawl. So I have knitted another Janina Kallio pattern before, which was the Antarctic shawl, which is one of my favourites. This could become one of my favourite patterns too. I have a couple of the Antarctic ones. So that's my second finished object, but I have got another work in progress to show you. So I don't think I showed you this last week because I hadn't done any work on it, but I picked up my sparkle cardigan again, and I've actually started the sleeve. So there's quite an interesting construction on this. To begin with, I started on the back of the work and then just knitted just to the bottom of the armpit, knitted the fronts down to where the armpit is, and then joined it and knitted backwards and forwards to do the length of the cardigan. And I knitted this to just go to my waist, so I kept measuring it on me, and I just did about 1 inch of rib. It did say to do 2 inches, but I decided just to do 1, and then I've just cast off at the bottom. And then I have picked up stitches. So you basically pick up the stitches around the armhole, and then you're knitting short rows backwards and forwards to form this lace pattern that goes over the arm. I've just got to the point now where I've joined in the round, and I'll be knitting away down the sleeve length. I think I'm going to be doing a 3/4 length sleeve for this. I do love the way this lace is looking. This is a yarn that I've dyed in the Pretty in Pink colourway on my merino and nylon base, and I'll leave a link to the pattern and the yarn in the description bar down below. So there we go, my sparkle cardigan by Locatelli. I was going to say about this cardigan is that I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for somebody who hasn't knitted garments before, because I think on some sections I need to read the paragraph a few times before I know exactly what I'm doing. For instance, when you're doing the short rows, I think it would be helpful to have a little sentence that says that the initial backwards and forwards, you want to centre that stitch count across the shoulder line, which you can tell because you picked up stitches on that line, so it's slightly thicker, just you have a small ridge. So just make sure that you've got your sleeve centred before you sort of start knitting it, otherwise you'll have a wonky arm. Now I'm down to the point where I'm working in the round. That should be quite easy, and I'm thinking of transferring over to some 12-inch circular needles rather than doing a magic loop. I didn't really need short circular needles when I was doing the short rows over the shoulder, so I still haven't used loads of yarn on this. I've got about, I think I've used about 180 grams, so I've actually dyed and caked up 400 grams, so I should have plenty left over. Mind you, it might take a little bit more than I think to finish the sleeves off. We shall see. I shall let you know how much yarn I use. So that is all the knitting I've got to show you this week, but I have been busy doing some sewing. So I'd like to ask Barbara to come and show you what I've been up to this weekend. Thank you very much, Barbara. So this is the Kalle shirt, I think that's how you pronounce it, and it's a closet core pattern. And they have relatively recently extended the size range up to a size 30, I think. So I didn't have to grade up a size, which is good. So I've chosen the cropped version, but I did add 2 inches to the length of the body at the front panel and the back panel because I didn't want it to be too cropped. The back panel is slightly longer than the front panel. It goes over your bum nicely, and I'm really pleased I added those 2 inches. I'd seen a video by Lauren from Goose Regani, and she'd actually added 2 inches, so I sort of copied her on that. And I'm really pleased I did, because it's just the perfect length now. I chose the standard button placket because you could choose a hidden one, and there was also a mandarin collar choice as well as a partial button placket, but I went for the standard one with the standard collar and collar stand. I did put the pocket on this side here, but actually thinking about it, I probably should have put it this side. But when I've put it on after, I thought, well, maybe I need 2 pockets now, because I really like how I'd used the fabric diagonally on the pocket in contrast to the main panel here. And I also did that with the button placket, the cuffs on the sleeve, and also the back panel just here. So it's like a standard shirt, so it's quite oversized and gapey. It's not a very fitted shirt at all, but I actually really quite like it. I was a bit unsure to start with because it is quite sort of gapey at the back, but I think that gives you a little bit more room, and it sort of fits in with the style. So it is supposed to be quite an oversized shirt, quite a comfortable oversized one. There are lots of sort of little techniques to use in this shirt, so if you haven't made a shirt with a collar stand before, just beware, it'll take a while. I think it took me about 6 hours to make the shirt, because you've got the collar stand, the button placket, the pocket to add, the cuffs, and then you've got this facing that goes all the way around the bottom of the shirt, which is a little bit fiddly as well. I did find that this fabric really didn't press very well at all. It was a Rainbow Fabrics purchase, and I think it's a mixture between polyester and cotton, and I think that there's slightly more polyester than I initially thought. Anyway, I think it just said a poly cotton, so I had to use quite a really cool iron on this so that it didn't melt it. And I found a bit of a nightmare trying to press round curves to get it nice and smooth, because it just wouldn't press nice and crisply. So I'd like to remake this shirt in a nice sort of cotton lawn or something like that, and I think something like a really drapey viscose would be really lovely too. So to choose my size, I basically went for my upper bust measurement to fit my shoulders, and then I graded out slightly so that it was big enough to go over my hips without touching it too much. And I did actually go up 1 more size than I normally would, because I'm obviously quite pregnant. So I need a little bit more room there, but it does hide my bump quite well, or at the moment at least, so at least there'll be a bit more room to wear for a couple of months. And it's a summer shirt, so by the time we get to sort of September, I'm sure I'll be wanting to wear warmer clothes anyway. And of course it's really quite wearable, even if it is a little bit oversized, for next summer as well. I found some buttons in my stash that were like a creamy colour to go with the white in the yellow and white check, but I'm not particularly pleased with this fabric. But now it's sewn, I'm glad it's done, because it's really pretty. It's just not my favourite fabric in the world. Although, because it wouldn't press very well, it probably means that it won't crease so well either, so which is always a good thing in terms of wearing. So you can see that it's like a grown-on sleeve at the back here. I used the burrito method to make the yoke at the back, which gives a nice neat finish on the inside. If you look inside the sleeve there, you can see that it's a double side of that yoke fabric, so it encloses all the seams really nicely. I actually really like the way this pattern is written, because all of the seams are enclosed. The side seams, you use a French seam to close those. When you add in the cuffs on, that encloses all the seams. Same again with the collar and the facing that goes all the way around the sides. I did find a YouTube tutorial on how to make the shirt completely. Basically the way that I've done it was by Devon Thread, and she does a lot of dressmaking as well, so if you're interested, go over and have a look at her channel as well. But I will leave a link to that particular tutorial in the description bar down below, because I found it really useful to have a little look at the way she'd done it. So there we go, there's the Kalle shirt. I shall get Barbara to let me try it on so you can see what it looks like on me. Thank you very much, Barbara. So this is my Kalle shirt. I've got to do my twirls in here because the lounge is covered with Advent yarn. But you can see how it is quite loose and baggy, especially in this back panel where there's an inverted plate, box plate at the back. But I quite like that. I like that the back panel is nice and long and it goes over my bum, and there's plenty of room, extra room here for my bump. But I really like this sort of loose style, quite summery, and you can always wear it sort of open over a vest top like I have underneath. I really like the shape. But you can see I've added 2 inches in the body, and that would have come up quite short if I'd have left it how it is. But there we go. That's my Kalle shirt. I just love how this pocket looks. I'm very tempted to put one this side as well. I really enjoyed sewing the collar on it as well, so that's good. So there we go, that's my Kalle shirt. So I'm on to my gadget section. So I'm going to talk about marking pens for fabric. Now all 3 of these disappear with heat. This Clover White one also can be washed away, but I've never actually used that function. I've just always used heat to make it disappear. So these are the 3 pens that I tend to use. These 2 are by Friction, and this one is a Clover White marker, which I sell in my online shop. I'll leave a link in the description bar down below to this one. I don't sell these in my shop as yet, but these are the 3 favourite ones I like to use. So the white one I find is really useful for working with darker fabrics, because obviously the line is white. I do find that sometimes it just takes a few seconds to appear, which is a bit weird, but it is quite good. You just need to leave it for about, I don't know, 10-20 seconds until the writing actually appears, which is quite magical. The Friction ones they do in multiple colours, and I tend to use those for lighter coloured fabrics. I find that sometimes the white, when you've ironed it off, if it does leave a mark on a fabric, it'll always go sort of to the darker side. So say if it's a black fabric that you've done the mark on, it doesn't show up as much, if that makes sense. And then with these ones, if it does leave a mark, it'll go to the whiter side, so it'll look like a white line. So you just have to be careful. If I'm working on a very light fabric, I'll think actually that'll be fine with these, and if I'm working on a very dark fabric with this, that'll be fine. But if you're not sure of how it's going to react, I'd just test the material first. Most of them it'll just disappear, but you do get the odd one. But they're so much easier than having to use sort of chalk, and I quite often I'll use these instead of doing tailor tacks in terms of dressmaking, which I think is useful. So just to bear those tips in mind about the colour changing, and the white one just needing to leave it for 20 seconds or so before the actual mark shows up. It's ideal to have a white one, I think, because they seem to sell these in all different colours, but then having a white one I found was quite difficult to find until I got hold of these Clover ones. So that is my gadget for this week, and I'm going on to my Ask Me Anything section now. So I've got a couple of questions from Candice, and first of all she asked, where do I get my lavender from, which I tend to make a little lavender pouch every time I sell a bag, and I put that in with it just as a little extra. And Candice was wondering where I got my lavender from. Well, it's from my garden. Well, most of it is. I have quite a big patch of lavender outside the front of my house. Also, my friend Margaret has a garden where it's absolutely jammed with plants, and she's got quite a massive patch of lavender in the front and her back garden. So she always gives me the cut-offs so I can then use it for the little lavender bags rather than chucking it away. It gets used. So that's where my lavender comes from. The second question from Candice, she said that she's noticed that some of the sort of stuffed toys that I'd made that were behind me have moved, and she was wondering whether they've gone into the baby room. Well, some of them have, yes. I have had a little bit of a sort out. I wanted to declutter a little bit because I felt like everything was sort of jam-packed in. So some of the items have gone into the baby room, but it's nowhere near ready yet. So I won't show you just yet, but I'm planning on making quite a few things for the baby room in the next few months. So I will give you an update as I'm going along, as I'm making things, but also at the end when I've sort of got everything together. My second question is from Anita, and she was asking me on what bind off I use for garments. She said she quite often uses a stretchy bind off, but sometimes it looks a little bit untidy. Anita, I'm with you. I always use a stretchy bind off on a garment because I'd just hate it if it was all tight around the ribbon area. So I tend to do that. I think it's the same one as you were talking about. You basically knit or purl in the rib pattern that you've used on the bottom of the garment, and then you'd either knit or purl 2 stitches, and then whatever you did last, say you did knit purl, then I'd purl through the back loop of the 2, and then I'd do a knit, and then I'd knit through the back loop of the 2. So I'd carry on like that. I will leave a link in the description bar down below to a video tutorial that is the same way as that I use, so that if you don't understand my rambling of what I mean. So when I do a shawl bind off, I'll quite often do a knit, yarn over, knit, and then slip those 2 stitches over the last stitch and bind off like that, because it gives a nice stretchy bind off. That's even stretchier than the one I use for the bottom of a garment. I'll put up a link to that one as well in the description bar if that's helpful to anybody. So I've got on to my last section now, shop update. So I just wanted to talk quickly about the advent calendars. I have put a page on my website where there's details of prices and different yarn bases, so that you can go and have a little look on there because there's quite a lot of information that I'm going to be talking about. So I'll leave a link in the description bar down below, but actually I've already popped up on the top of my website, as soon as you open it, a link there to it if you can't find the menu bar. But basically the advent calendars are a little package of yarn for every day of advent, and you can either choose a 12-day or a 24-day advent. And I'm also doing 10 grams and 20 gram minis in the merino and nylon base, the merino, nylon and stellina base for those 2, and then I'm also, this year I'm adding 2 additional bases. I'm going to do a DK merino and also a BFL merino, but the DK and the BFL are only going to be available in 20 gram minis, but I'll still be doing the 12 and the 24-day advents for those. So basically in your advent box you'll have 12 or 24 little packages with little mini skeins of yarn and a few little extras like stitch markers and things. I will also be emailing you a pattern. So with the advent this year I am designing a blanket pattern, so you'll be getting that as well. I'll email that out to you in November, so you'll get it in plenty of time for advent to start knitting when you're opening those little packages. And I will also be doing, if you're not that interested in having sort of an advent calendar with all this different little minis of yarn, I'm also be doing a sock set and project bag of the same theme. So that'll come with 100 grams and a 20 gram mini in all the bases that I've chatted about for the advents, the same bases, but obviously it'll be 100 and under 20 grams, so you get enough to make a pair of socks. You will also get a sock pattern, which I'll be releasing in November as well, so you'll get a sock pattern emailed to you. It won't be in the kit. And the theme for this year's advent and sock set is Starlight Wishes, and I'll pop a picture up here of the sort of art that I've created to represent this year's advent. It's basically a painting that I've done of a shooting star in the night sky, and I just thought that Starlight Wishes was a lovely little theme. It's a bit different for this year. Like I said, the advents and the sock sets will go on sale on the 1st of August, and they're on for pre-order, and they will be shipped at the beginning of October. So if you do order that with anything else in my shop, I will be shipping them together, so they won't be shipped until the beginning of October. So lastly, I just wanted to mention that I'm increasing the sizes that I'm stocking in DPN needles. So I'll be stocking up to a 5.5mm DPN needle now. I think that's a US size 9, and that'll be in the steel, the sharp steel and the bamboo as well. So they're already up on my website if you want to get hold of those. A couple of the other things I've restocked this week in terms of hire. I'm still waiting on a few things to be restocked at the warehouse, but I keep checking every week, so as and when they're back in stock with the warehouse, I'll get some and pop them in mine. So I think that's all for this week. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I shall see you in the next episode. Bye!